Welcome back, everyone, to episode 3 of the Life Midwest podcast. I'm your host, Kevin, alongside my buddy, Wes.
Howdy, howdy.
Well, the My Friend series is finally over.
No. Wait, is it?
No, it's not. For now, it is, though.
That's right, because today we're talking about perception, attribution, and empathy.
So Wes sent me some really great notes, as a communications major, on the perception, attribution, and empathy, which sound like really great words, but it's like, what do we mean, right? What do we mean when we say these words? So just to quickly break it down here, perception, right? How we see the world, our circumstances externally and internally, affect how we view the world, and kind of like our interactions, right? Attribution is more of like how we base like our knowledge, right? Things that we know, experiences that we've had within our lives, our upbringing, who we currently are today. And we use those to interpret other interactions as we're kind of like navigating this beast of life. And we're going to dive into more of these, there's things like attribution errors, which Wes is going to talk about. The last piece is empathy, right? This is the easy one. Everybody knows empathy, putting yourself in the shoes of others and feeling for them as if they were you.
Yeah, it's like the golden rule or something.
So Wes, why do I care about these things? Why do I care about perception, attribution, empathy, and kind of putting those three things together here?
Why do you care about them? Why should you care about them? That's what we're going to address in this entire episode, but I feel like everyone can benefit from at least having a wider understanding of the topics, how we think, how we interact, how we communicate with one another, and a little bit not too deep of the psychology that goes behind it. Because communication doesn't come without the brain, because, that's just brains talking to each other. With peripherals and whatnot. So it's not like imperative, like, oh, I need to know what attribution error theory is or what it states. Like, you don't need to know any of that. You just kind of got to know the abstract of it. And I feel knowing such will put you in a position where you can navigate social interactions not only better. So like if you have social anxiety or whatever, you now can predict kind of how those actions will turn out. As opposed to kind of just, obviously if you have anxiety disorder, you're going to be anxious anyways.
Yeah, you're like winging that conversation versus like this would give you certain tools to kind of help you navigate and understand that better.
Right. And not only like, so speechcraft or whatever, speechcraft 100 out of 100, goals. You don't need that, I don't feel. Like it doesn't have to be that extreme. But also it can help communities. So let's say you hold some type of resentment or animosity for a friend, old friend, family member, or just a random stranger. Knowing the things that cause those feelings, knowing what led up to those circumstances can help you kind of combat some of the negative emotions and energy that come along with that, and maybe even mend within communities. It would be great for leaders to know, if you're a CEO or HR manager, you don't even have to be like big dog.
Some type of leadership role within the workforce.
Yeah, just knowing how communication works, why people communicate, and some of the problems that you would experience within it can lead you to create like a more positive work environment that combats those things that people may not suspect that will rise up. Like, why do we have so many issues around here? It might, stave some of that off.
And to bounce off that too, Wes, it's not about like, oh, here's how to be a better person, but it's also about like how to be at peace with someone who's not being a better person, right?
Absolutely. I wish I would have said that, because that sums it up quite a bit better than all the jumbo bumbo whatever I was speaking.
Well, you can either take the long scenic route or you can get layman's terms. I think that's why there's two hosts here.
Yeah, that's perception.
Perception.
Kevin perceives he's useful. Just kidding.
I do. I pretend to perceive. Never mind. So as we're with perception, attribution, empathy, all of these kind of base from communication, right?
Yeah, so one's desire to communicate. I think it's first important to mention that communicative is like premeditative. You might say things, blurt them out or spur of the moment, excitement. But generally, when you're in a social interaction with someone, it is for a purpose. If you want something, you're going to, befriend someone and like get what you want from them. Or if you don't want to show something to someone, you're going to say certain words to maybe hide the information that you don't want them to know. When you raise your hand in class and say, "Yay, call on me," you're displaying through communication that you think you're smart, that you want to be, a good student, knowledgeable. In every peripheral part of humans, the things we keep, the friends we keep, even the way we light our house, is based on our needs, our desires, and we communicate them. You display pictures of your family, you communicate you're a family man, that's important to you. If you display pictures of anime girls, that's important to you. You like anime. There's a lot of things, with like don't even really need a detective's mindset. Just like looking at someone in their circumstances, you can kind of see what they're communicating non-verbally. As far as verbal communication goes, your boss is grilling you. You're going to say whatever you can to get out of that conversation. All thoughts lead to communication that gets you out of that situation. And I just wanted to address that real quick. I think I'm already going too much into it. Communication is there for our needs and desires. It's not something that happens for no reason. There's no rhyme or, there is a rhyme or reason to it. And communication students, professors, scholars, sociology, psychology, all the things that involve the brain and how humans interact in social interactions is combined and there for a purpose that we can dissect, discern, and find a pattern to.
So we communicate to save face and all communications for a purpose, right? Didn't you say that? All communications for a purpose.
Yeah.
So the cynical part of my brain was like, well, what about small talk? But then I was like, well, if you think about it, you're doing not to create a paradox here, but you're creating a small talk with a person because you don't want that person to think that you're weird. You're literally saving face by talking about nothing.
Yeah.
I like where we're at already. Before we get started, let's take a quick 30-second break. Tell you a little bit about our sponsor, Anchor. Welcome back to the Life Midwest podcast. It's Kevin alongside your good old buddy Wes here. If you're looking for ways to support us, we'll be giving you some avenues here in the coming weeks. All that we really ask right now is keep giving us that feedback. Shout out to us on all of our socials at the Life Midwest. Leave us a couple of reviews on your favorite listening platform: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you see us. Really help us get started and get us out there. We'd love to hear what you have to say and make sure we're striking a chord with you. That's the goal with all of this. So, Wes, before we get started here, I feel like the best way to kind of explain, perception, attribution, and empathy to the audience, and kind of how we see it, is to apply it to an everyday sort of scenario, something that just really gets under our skin. So, it's your time to vent, buddy. Tell me about something that happens to you, whether I guess it doesn't matter how frequently it happens to you, but just it makes you absolutely rage on the inside.
There's a lot of things that make me just like rage, I guess, angry. I have to say the number one thing that just like gets my goat would be dealing with bad customer service. So I understand they have a job to do and it's probably a crappy job and they're probably not making very much money and they have to deal with Karens all day or people like me who rage when they get bad customer service. But it just, oh my God, like that's your job. So I'm in need of some type of help. And maybe I don't know how to word it. I'm not an expert in the field I'm coming to these people for. And, you know, if they have an attitude, that's immediately like, okay, this conversation's going nowhere. And then I'm just like secretly seething through the whole thing because they have an attitude. If they decide that they know more than me, which they probably do, but like, do you have to feel smarter than your customers? Like, do you have to belittle them and stuff? So it just makes me really angry. I'm not sure why that happens. And just when I come to terms with it at the end of just being angry, I realize that I probably mischaracterized the person. I probably assumed their circumstances, like this person's being an asshole because maybe they haven't been laid in a while. You know, like just like weird extrapolations from nothing, like just grasping at straws. In the heat of the moment, all worked up, just like defacing this person's character in my mind. And that's not helpful. Luckily, I have like I guess I know how to like, I don't know, not take that negative energy with me into the future. But if I didn't have that, like those breaks, like I would just be walking around pissed all day because some dude on the customer service line told me to restart my computer. And I'm like, do you think I didn't?
And it's interesting too, because if you think about it, when we're getting mad in the moment, right, we're making all these unjustified assumptions about the person. And then when we're turning around and we're cooling our jets over the situation, we're also making all of these baseless assumptions about them as well.
Right.
I.e. like, oh, they probably haven't gotten laid in a while. So I'm not really proud of, I have an example to share and I'm not really proud of it. But maybe some of you will find some comedic humor in it. I've lived in several different places around the country. If you've listened to our previous episode, the only one where I really can recall that there's 2 lanes at McDonald's is in the Midwest. And not every McDonald's is the same, right? Some have 2 lines. Some have 1 line that splits into 2. Maybe some of them don't even have 2. So the one locally by where I live has 1 lane that splits into 2. Because the parking lot isn't wide enough for there to be 2 lanes its entire length of the parking lot. So it starts off as 1 lane and then splits into 2. You get the idea. So one morning I'm just on edge. I don't know why. I woke up, I rolled out of bed, I'm just on edge. I deal with a lot of anxiety and mental health issues. I can wake up and feel terrible for any random reason, and that's just the way it is. So I go to McDonald's, and I'm in the line where it's about to split. The person behind me assumes that I have taken the route of the first lane, which I haven't. My car isn't even turned. I could easily at any point go into either lane. This person comes in, goes around me, and goes into the second lane. And I'm like, okay, all right, whatever. Like at this point, I'm still trying to assume positive intent. This person's in a rush. They're late to work. Still need something to eat when you're going to go to work, right? So I let it go. Then the person in front of me gets cut off by this person who cut around me into the second lane. And that's when I had had enough. And I saw the guy in front of me kind of like toss his hand like that, like, oh, you know, and I felt for him. And I just had enough. I had felt like this person thought that they were more important than me. And I was willing to let it go. But then they did it again to somebody else that wasn't me. And I just felt empathy for the second person to the point where it tripped me up. So I rolled down my window and I yelled, "Hey, you with the shitty car, do you know how lines work?" And what was funny was that was pretty much the end of the interaction between her and I. She said something to me and I was like, "Oh yeah, very intelligent, ha ha, blah, blah, blah." And, now that I sit here and I think about it, it's like, she was probably having a bad day. She's probably in a rush. She's probably this. She's probably that. She didn't need me to tell her that she had a shitty car. She probably already knew that she had a shitty car. She doesn't need some random person reminding her of that. What's funny about it is that the guy ended up arguing with her more than I did. Like the guy that she ended up cutting off. So in a way, it's funny. But in another way, it's not.
The situation's funny, I guess. I would have like an anxiety attack if I was with you. I'd be like, Kevin, shut the fuck up.
Well, and I generally don't get into it with other people. I don't, because I'm too afraid of confrontation. I'm too afraid of something going south. But for some reason, every now and again, I get these random moments of courage where I'm just like, I'm tired of myself or people or witnessing people getting stepped on or not being treated right or fairly.
So you rage for other people's benefits then?
Sometimes.
Not as virtuous as only times.
I just feel like it's more justifiable that I'm getting mad for somebody else. I'm so good at letting things pass when it's me. But when I do it for somebody else, then I don't have to worry about coming off as selfish. So I think I just get a lot more unafraid to do something like that. Yeah.
That's almost the perfect example for what we're talking about today. So let's dissect that, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
So Kevin, being a person who has circumstances basically orbiting him, like, we can be a little selfish with this experiment. We are the center of the universe, okay? And everything in that universe is all together in like a system, entropy, chaos. It comes together, it goes apart. There's systems at every level that make sure that basically everything's interconnected. So we look at Kevin as the center of this universe. His family affects how he thinks. His community affects how he thinks. His friends, extended community, work culture. Basically, if people around you are affirming to you that, oh, well, people are just selfish and people don't know what they're doing and any number of negative things about other humans, it's kind of okay to do these things, Like, and maybe it's not okay in retrospect, but you become emboldened by not only your anger, adrenaline, circumstances in the moment, but all those other circumstances. Like, people maybe don't think what's going on below the surface, but like, you're micro scanning basically, or macro scanning, like just every instance of every memory in your brain and looking for reasons to justify actions, classifying stuff based off like patterns in your mind of how you classify things. So Kevin's more than just this human with a mouth that told this woman she has a shit car because she pulled in front of him and another customer. Kevin's bringing with him all his circumstances to this battle. This woman is exactly like Kevin, a human who exists within an environment, who has their own circumstances that lead her into battle. So here's these two people in battle. It's not a real battle. We're not, it's not.
It's like a verbal battle.
Yeah. So Kevin goes right for the throat. You got a shit car, lady. And the lady's like, fuck. I would imagine. What did I do? And maybe that's when she realized she cut in front of people. Oh. But like, you just elevated it to, hey, yo, bitch, your car suck. And if I cut in front of you, I would feel bad until I heard that. Like, oh, really? And it just escalates there. So Kevin goes to this drive-thru. He perceives he's done wrong, or someone has done wrong to him. He then attributes those to those actions of the other person. Or she just obviously doesn't know, apparently. Like, who does this? I got to speak up. And then he uses those attributions, i.e., this woman don't know what she's doing, and then externalizes those to this woman. This woman now gets to attribute to herself not only her own actions, but the actions of the guy behind her screaming at her. And Kevin gets to attribute afterwards not only his actions, but the actions of the woman, replying back whatever she replied. And this will affect their future communication. Now,
damn right it will.
And I'm assuming there's some type of, you go through a drive-through. Oh, crap. What's it going to be this time? Is there going to be someone that just, blows my top for me again? Or am I going to encounter that lady again? Am I going to encounter more like her? Oh, my God, this is so reoccurring.
Yeah, I'm tense now when I go through any drive-through, even if it's a one lane, and I just want to, I want to get over with that interaction at the order screen. I want that interaction to be over with as soon as possible, so I don't have to worry about what's happening in the other lane. I can just go, and I can just pay, and then I can just grab what I ordered and just get out, because that's all I can focus on now is just getting out, because I don't want to face anything else.
And I think that's where the crux of this episode comes into play. So I can teach all the communications aspect of it. I mean, it's all over the internet. You can go to community college or whatever and learn it. Or I could just, read from my textbook. That's all great. I don't think that's going to, the people listening to this, I don't think anyone's going to walk away and be like, oh, cool. Attribution error theory suggests that you don't know shit about anyone. But that comical little quip about it probably explains literally the whole theory. That's as deep as we need to go here. And I think I'm maybe going a little too deep. So attribution is just our perception first. Perception, I saw some stuff. Attribution, I labeled that stuff. Where this episode takes it is we add the next step to it. So we can tell you all these cool communication things. You think this way, you label things this way, you then think about those labels and then use that to label future things.
But sometimes we take those labels and we incorrectly apply them, right? And that's where we get this attribution errors. That's where attribution error comes in and can really muck things up.
And I think everyone's experienced this. If you haven't, first of all, you're wrong. You have.
You just may not know what it's called. It's one of those things where you're totally familiar with it. You just didn't know it had a name. So give us an example of that, Wes.
You see your significant other just sitting in the corner, head down, scowling. And you're like, what's wrong? Are you mad? Why do you look mad? And they're just sitting there, with a freaking headache. They're like, I'm not mad. Nothing's wrong. And you're like, well, what's wrong? Something's wrong because I'm smart and I know everything. And they're like, no, nothing's wrong. I'm not mad. I just don't feel well. Oh, really? And that's you over and over and over and over making attribution errors.
Because you've perceived that you see a scowl. And your attribution is you're labeling that scowl as anger because you've seen anger before. And you're identifying it as anger because that's what it looks like. And maybe a combination of that allows you to wrongly think that you have made them upset when you haven't. Am I following this?
That's exactly right. And you are not the other person. You never will be. That's called the fundamental attribution error. Is you think egocentrically. You can only think through your own self because that's all you've experienced. You can think vicariously through how you think other people may have felt based on their actions, just like you described. You perceive them in a certain way, and then you attribute how you would feel during that because, duh, you're everyone, and everyone's you, and you're smart. But it's all egocentric. It's all you and only you. You're making all that up. So when you're looking at your significant other and they're just not feeling it because, they have a headache, and you're like, what's wrong? Hey babe, you okay? You good? What would I do? And you're just making them angry because there was nothing wrong. Now there is. You're annoying. Everyone's experienced this. That is the fatal attribution error. And then of course it's an attribution error, and it's just you attributing wrongly. It happens. So this person that cut in front of Kevin's like, this person doesn't know how drive-thrus work. That's an attribution based on his observations. Maybe they do know how drive-thrus work. Maybe they're just an asshole. Or he perceives, well, that person's an asshole, and they just don't know how drive-thrus work. Or any infinite number of factors that come into play. They could be blind and shouldn't be driving. Like, how did this person get in front of me? There's people behind me. Oh.
Draw me like a parallel example here, and give me this same formula applied to your pet peeve. Not your pet peeve. Apply it to your
rage-inducing experiences.
Yes.
So with my example for customer service, this is actually quite easy. I walk into a Verizon store. I don't actually have Verizon. This is not a paid advertisement. And I complain to the person, my phone doesn't work. And the person's like, okay. And then they're like, could you give me more information? And then I explain my problem. So it's doing this, doing this, doing this, doing this. And immediately the person looks at me. Oh, it's because of this. But I haven't finished talking. How do you know? Like, are you even listening to me? Or whatever. This guy's apparently smarter than me. So then they explain my problem back to me, but incorrectly. And now I'm mad. So I'm like, so this person's just stupid. They shouldn't be working here because they, A, bad at customer service. They don't want to actually help me. They just want to talk to me or talk at me. And B, like, don't cut me off. So I'm like mad at this person and saying things about them in my head. But in this example, they literally could have had that same problem, just a different person, moments before me walk in, and they're like, I know what you're talking about. You might not have described it right, but I'm the expert here and I know what you're talking about. And I can help you immediately, but you're over there being salty because you think I'm an asshole or whatever. I attributed this person's eagerness to cut me off and tell me what my problem was to them not actually hearing my problem, not caring about my problem, and just trying to get me out of there so they can go back to, I don't know, playing with all the phones in the lobby. And that person probably looked at me and like, dumb customer. I'm right, but whatever. And this is a fictional example. Everyone's had many and many and many of just terrible customer service interactions. I think that's part of the course. Like that, if I had to define customer service, it'd be just like hell. So this guy attributed me as, just a dumb customer. I explained something wrongly to him and he already knew an answer for me, but I refused to receive it because I don't trust his expertise. I'm, whatever. And I attributed him as someone who just doesn't give a crap about customers when really he's just trying to help me. And I think my attribution error there is A, attributing him incorrectly, but the fatal attribution would be, once again, I'm not him. I attributed him cutting me off eagerly to tell me what's wrong with my problem as him just not caring.
You gave me a lot of good stuff to read on this topic, and isn't it fundamental attribution error?
Have I been saying not fundamental attribution error?
I don't know. The most recent one you said fatal, so I just wanted to make sure. Is there a difference there, or is that just a slip up?
Ooh, my bad, guys. It's fundamental attribution error. Don't take fatal attribution error away from this.
In my reading, if I can jump in here, in the reading, a lot of the stuff that in preparation of this episode, this is probably the most relevant thing to me personally, and I hope others find it relevant too. And we're gonna provide a link to this article too, but right off the get-go in one of these articles, it says people have a cognitive bias to assume that a person's actions depend on what kind of person that person is, rather than on the social and environmental forces that influence the person. Holy shit. Like think about what Wes was just saying a little bit ago, right? The way Wes was explaining it, like me in that altercation with that lady in the shitty car, in reality, that conflict is actually kind of dissecting environmental forces that influenced that interaction, right? The environmental forces of this being a specific McDonald's where it's one lane that drives into two, right? Like little things like that, the setup there that causes that situation. But in the moment, I'm getting angry because I assume that this person who cuts me and this other customer off is a specific type of person that I don't like. And when I read that sentence, I was like, my brain exploded, like in the good way, where you have that moment where you're like, like that's what happened when I read that.
Right. And in my example with the customer service representative, I'm assuming he has like some motivation, like who he is. He doesn't care about customers. He rather talk than listen to customers' problems. He thinks he's smart. These are all attacks on him and his character. It's actually a fallacy. Maybe not in this context. It's called the ad hominem fallacy. You're arguing with someone and you talk about them instead of the argument at hand. Lady cuts you off in McDonald's parking lot. This lady's now a stupid bitch or whatever. But that's
usually how Facebook arguments turn out when people stop having good facts to argue with.
Right. So it's not the same thing. I don't want to say it's the same thing. I don't want to confuse people. But it's kind of like an ad hominem argument in the sense that instead of actually like really looking at the facts, the environmental issues, like Kevin just said, that, and somehow I didn't think about this earlier. That's a weird ass McDonald's. One lane turns into two lanes, and you can drive past the people in the long line and just enter the second line. And maybe you just assume it's a different line for whatever reason. And we're attacking people's person, like their actions, who they are, why they're doing it, assuming stuff beyond our pay grade, what we don't know.
We're taking if I can phrase that, we're taking people's actions, and because we're angry at those people's actions, we're attacking their character.
Yeah, absolutely. And while I was in school for this, I had a professor who used an example of someone kicking a dog. We look at this person, society and culture and your family, and assuming you come from an area where this is all relevant, where you come from, you generally don't kick dogs. If you see someone kicking a dog, what do you think about that person? Oh God, what a piece of crap. They just kicked that harm. What's the dog going to do? They just kicked it. And now that person we attributed as being, awful person, trash human being, dickhead, whatever you would use. What we didn't see was the dog actually bit him, and he was kicking the dog away from him. And that's what made this theory stick with me. I know Kevin. I know his character. I know Kevin doesn't kick dogs. If I saw him kick a dog, I would be, what was that for? Don't be a dick. And then he explains the dog bit him. I'm no longer mad at Kevin. In that intermediate time, I attributed his actions to him, his character, him being a dick. Who the hell kicks dogs? But as more information comes available, I no longer, it would become delusional to say, Kevin kicks dogs. He's a terrible person. This leads so well into knowledge deficit perception. We discussed perception, how you see the world based on your circumstances. Knowledge plays into that too. If you don't have, you're hanging out in a Harvard library, but you've never even attended college, yet you're reading books among all these elites, you're not going to have the same bag of words, bag of scenarios, bag of circumstances, bag of knowledge, bag of theories, whatever, to pull out from to actually define your worldview, when compared to these people. You're at a deficit, if you will. Same way with attribution errors. You're at a deficit when you're attributing others' actions to however you assume they are, because you're not that person.
So I want to challenge you with $1 million question here then. So what if you are that person? And I'm, of course, talking about empathy.
Right, because you put yourself in the other person's shoes.
Right. It's probably the most basic thing out of everything that we're talking about today that most people probably have some sort of grasp or understanding of. But we can use empathy to filter out and try to curb those attribution errors, right, Wes?
Yeah, once you know them, of course. So you now know attribution, you know perception, you know the errors that come with it all. And if you put yourself in other people's shoes, you would have to assume everyone's, basically like you. So imagine your environment at the worst times in your life. Not only your environment inside, the external factors that make you think and perceive and attribute as you do, but also the internal ones. So you're just like deathly sick or ill. You feel terrible. You might be in like tremendous like stress or some type of situation that like life is just miserable to live. Just imagine yourself at your worst. And then imagine the actions you make while you're under those influences of those circumstances. Like people who don't feel good snap at people. If you have a headache and kids are screaming, you might tell the kids, shut the F up. I'm trying to, whatever. Now imagine everyone is you. So you're seeing all these lunatics, crazies running around, doing God knows whatever they want, getting in your way, making you angry, and you're prescribing your own reasons for why they do that. I would challenge you not to do that. Don't prescribe your own reasons. Just assume that person's you at your worst. If you see someone doing some heinous stuff, give them the benefit of the doubt. What's the chances they're doing that, to be evil, to be spiteful, mean, or angry? I might be naive here. I would like to imagine that every single person is just me at some point in life. I've lived a lot of circumstances. I've been the bad guy. I've been the good guy. I've been the neutral guy in between. I've been an utter dickhead. Like, people have seen me at a level I hope I never see me or no one sees me again. But to my family, myself, my friends, I deserved redemption, I feel. And so does everyone else. So instead of escalating with the rando across the counter or across the drive-thru or across the phone or hall or whatever, just don't. I mean, this goes right into the golden rule. Treat others how you would like to be treated. Do you want people to assume your attributions? Do you want people like you're having a bad day, but everyone labels you by that bad day?
It kind of goes back to what we were talking about in the first episode when we did your My Friend series, Wes. We were talking about how we take the actions of one person and we use that to identify them. And I don't mean to make that like a flagship point in every single episode, but I really think that connects to what you're saying here as far as, there are people who are going to remember Wes Shirley from the way he was in high school or by the one thing that he did in high school, when that's not really a fair attribution of Wes, right? It's kind of the same thing. And so now I sit here and I think about, well, I don't want other people attributing me incorrectly. But I mean, it's going to happen. It's not something that I can control, but I know that I can control or at least try to curb my attribution errors. And I think the best way to do that is through empathy and kind of, to reword what you had said, Wes, kind of assuming positive intent, right? Giving people the benefit of the doubt. If we see someone doing something and we think it might be questionable based on our perceptions, that may not always be what we see, right? Because if it's not what we see, then that's an attribution error. If it is what we see, we should still assume positive intent because it's not our place to judge.
Yeah. There's this really cool short. It's originally a poem written by Andy Weir. It's called The Egg. It's like an animated science communication channel on YouTube called Kurgzig.
We're not going to try to pronounce it, but it will be linked within the podcast description.
Definitely check that out. It gets a little spiritual. If you're super religious, have an open mind. It doesn't knock any religion. It doesn't affirm any religions.
Full disclosure, I consider myself quite religious, and I approached it with an open mind. Nothing about it bothered me one bit. So
yeah, so go ahead, give that a listen. It'll be in the description. And it kind of ties this all together. It doesn't really go into the communication aspects of it, but it's a good watch and it's relevant to what we're talking about.
When you watch it, folks, I really want you to think about the examples that Wes and I gave. And those real world examples and try to connect that to what you see in the video. Because we obviously talk about what we're going to talk about before we do the podcast, right? But having done these things, and been a part of the experiences that we've shared and watching this video, I know for me personally, it was very powerful to connect those two things. Wes, I don't know if you feel the same. I'm hoping you guys will too, or at least see the connection that I'm trying to make there by bringing up that point. So Wes, I want to play devil's advocate here. And I want to ask the question that others might have. Why does this matter?
That's a hell of a question. It's also a good segue. So the reason we even decided to make this episode, the reason I came to you with this, and I think the reason you went along with it, is you don't have anything to lose by learning this, but also you have, the world to gain. Solid community, solid friendship interactions, solid all types of relationships, because relationships are really just maintaining healthy communication between any number of people, within an organization, a family, a group of friends. It could be a dyad, meaning two. It could just be a friendship or a relationship. Relationship with a significant other, with a boss, with a coworker, with your cousin, literally anything. Think of all the times you've just been at an impasse with someone you care about deeply, and you argue with them, something's wrong, you're like, oh, well, you're just so stuck on, insert any situation here.
Really, any situation.
Yeah, and look back and think of all the attribution errors you made that escalated that further. And I know when you're in the heat of the moment, you're in an argument, a disagreement, you just say whatever the hell happens, and most people will go back later and retcon that. I'm sorry, I said some bull crap. But it helps more than with just like interpersonal relationships. It definitely helps within organizational relationships as well. And what I mean by organizational relationships is, let's say your job, your workplace, your community, your city or town or whatever. You might not have a relationship with, the mayor and lawmakers of your town or city, but you have sort of a parasocial relationship with them in the sense that A, what they do affects how you live, and B, you probably have know abouts of them. Like, you might follow their Twitters, or someone might talk about them because they did something undesirable or desirable, depending on who you're talking to. And you kind of maintain these not relationships that have effects on your perception and action. So if you don't have a good community leader who knows how communication works and isn't fostering that within communities, I mean, sure, you can always go to your college and get an education, or ideally they start teaching stuff like this in high school. It's not hard to grasp. But until that happens, I guess this episode, in my mind at least, is to get the information out there and then to encourage people who have power to affect change, community leaders, spiritual leaders, bosses, HR managers, which probably already know all this. That's kind of part of their training. CEOs of a company, you can just keep squeezing every dime and dollar out of your laborers and not care about them. But you're creating a work environment that's not conducive to their success. And you're going to watch communication devolve within that environment. Knowing how communication plays and how environments and factors produce stress within those environments that produce actions within those environments due to stress, you can kind of get a grasp for how your actions are going to affect the bottom line. Sure, it sounds good. More money equal better. More money in my bank, better. But are you thinking in the long term? Are you thinking of the culture of that organization and how communication within it affects it?
Short-term versus long-term gains, right?
Yeah, in a sense. But both of them are really important, right? The short-term gains are important because you want to be happy in the moment. You want things to work cohesively in the moment. But long-term gains in the sense that, like, the world just keeps moving, right? If you just keep applying bandages to the problem, I mean, I know plenty of professionals who are in like management positions across the board in various trades and industries. And one of their constant issues is communication, work culture, how the bottom end don't feel like they're respected by the top end, and how the top end thinks the bottom end's all lazy, and how everyone's just mad and angry at each other. And look what we get. You go to the store and customer service is absolute ass, but the CEOs are making bank. And I don't want to go into all that. This isn't the life how I'm disgruntled. This is the life. This is like an amateur communications podcast. I don't need to start going off on my rant. But when we foster communication within these organizations, those things are going to come out in meaningful ways. The bottom half is able to not just think that the top half are a bunch of, money-sucking, good-for-nothing, lazy people who just benefit off their labor. And I've met plenty of people who actually feel that way. They're able to say it in a way that's not inflammatory. And they're able to say it in a way without making false attributions, without angering people, without turning the productive issue and solution to that issue into like a forever devolving chaotic problem. If you are a leader of an organization that sees stuff like this, I would recommend improving your company's culture. And this episode is just one part of that. Anyone who listens to us, I hope gets a perspective based on my personal worldviews, Kevin's personal worldviews. It's all perception. It's all our circumstances and the knowledge that we've gained through our lives combined with those circumstances to hopefully help some people. You can listen to this, turn it off and not care. That's fine too. If you take anything away from it, I feel like this has been worth it. But it doesn't even have to be that grand, really. You can just listen because it's fun.
So to recap, empathy and having empathy and stressing and spreading empathy and its effects heightens your perception and allows you to attribute things not necessarily more correctly, but with less errors.
And probably less often.
Do you want to talk about the links that we're going to be providing here in the podcast description, Wes?
Sure. I would like to, ideally, every single episode that isn't like a My Friend series, part of the My Friend series, anything that we talk on that has some type of like scholarly input behind it, like, professionals have studied this, wrote papers on it, had those papers peer reviewed, and then we come around and just say whatever we want. We want to make sure that we're held to some degree of accountability. I'm only, bachelor's level communication specialist. Kevin is still a student. We are not experts in our field, but we're trying to get there.
I just really like talking into a microphone, actually.
Don't give us away. Jeez. But I think we'll be providing links every single time. I'm not going to bog you down with scholarly journals. I'm going to find something that I think summarizes it well enough. And then if you wish to do further research, you can go to Google Scholar, or if you're in a university, you can use their database, or you can go to a library and use their database. You're more than welcome to do that. That's awesome. I hope everyone learns about the science behind communication,
because it's so relevant and so important, and especially in today's society.
Right. And not all of it's objective, but some of it is. And with that little bit of objectivity, what is hard science and a little bit of soft science, we're able to build off that. It's all just the scientific process. People make wild conjectures or hypotheses. I think this will work based on my perception. And then they test it. As far as communication goes, you can test it right at home. You can go to your significant other and ask them why they're mad and immediately watch that escalation. And then you can falsely attribute them and watch them get more angry. And then you've literally witnessed our whole episode. Have some empathy for them. Know that you're making them angry. Apologize. Explain what you did.
And you'll just be so glad that you tuned in today. Wes, next week we're going to be talking about critical thinking and skepticism. Care to give the audience a little bit of a preview?
Yeah, we're going to talk about, critical thinking, what it means to think critically, what skepticism is, and how you can utilize the tools. Just like today, we taught you a little bit about communication and gave you some information on communication and gave you some tools you can use in your life. Skepticism, critical thinking, just a couple more tools you can use. We'll explain them using some sort of technical terms and also layman's terms, and very, very similar vibe to today. But we're just going to give you more tools to navigate life.
Ooh. I'll give you some layman's terms. When you're critically thinking on how to fix your water damaged laptop, you should have skepticism when a YouTube video tells you to put your laptop in the dishwasher to clean off the soda. Did I do good?
Well, I guess you'll have to tune in next week to find out, won't you?
Cool. Thanks. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you next week. Same time, same place. Bye-bye.